Live from the KC Property Guys and KC Pier Studio in beautiful Kansas City. Home to over 200 fountains and more barbecue restaurants per capita than anywhere in the nation. It's the Kansas City Real Estate Industry Leaders Show, a show about industry leaders from the local Kansas City metro market for Kansas City real estate related professionals and enthusiasts like you. And now, here's your hosts, Eric and Lucas Shaley.
How's it going, everybody? It's Lucas Shaley, and welcome back to the Kansas City Real Estate Industry Leaders Podcast. I'm here with my co-host, Eric Shaley, today, as well as our Director of Operations for KC Pier, Brian Dufour. How you guys doing today?
Good.
Awesome. Well, we're just going to jump right into it today. We're going to be talking about foundation issues relative to the Kansas City area, as well as just general maintenance that goes into the foundation fixes that we do. So
yeah, you bet. And so, you know, for us on the KC Pier side, and you see this as Director of Marketing going to all the pier jobs that we do and taking some pictures, you know, and there's a reason why we're a business and we're not just privately done through KC Property Guys, is because it's in demand. I mean, foundation fixes in Kansas City area is in demand, and it's mainly like we talked about on our last episode, the clays within our soil and the expansion and contraction just totally stressing out these basement walls and sometimes slab floors. And so today we're going to spend some time talking about specifically different types of we're going to dive in deeper. You know, we did a good overview last chapter. This chapter we're going to dive in just a little bit deeper about the different types of foundation issues that you can find. And then we're also going to talk about, from a homeowner's perspective, what you can do to help avoid these things, because they're expensive. Yes, right? Our average ticket is $7,000 to $8,000, and they get much higher than that. We just got through a few weeks ago with a $50,000 job. It was a complete, basically, rehab without re-pouring the foundation, but it is fixed. It's a lifetime product, but the average ticket is not cheap. And like we talked about before, these things don't fix themselves. Yeah, they only get worse. So we're going to talk to homeowners and give some general advice that it sounds so basic, but it is so critical to the lifetime of that home to keep that foundation healthy. So we're going to jump into that and look forward to it. And so we brought Brian back into the studio with us today. Yeah. Right. And let's kick it off. I mean, we're talking about just general foundation issues, and maybe we just talk about some of the common ones that you guys see that in the field as you visit them, and then from there we're going to dive into maybe some of the specific types of general issues that you see.
Correct. Usually what we see is cracking. It's always cracking. In the basement, you'll see horizontal cracks in the foundation, or you'll see actual vertical cracks. Each crack tells you what it's doing and what type of issue you have. And also, not every crack is a bad crack.
Oh, really?
In fact, I heard you mention that yesterday, and we were in a house up in Lee Summit, and it's one that we actually just purchased on KC Property Guys' side, but it was full of some talking walls. And I like that you started with cracks, because from a homeowner's perspective, I mean, what do you see when you go to the basement, and that's going to alarm you? Yeah, it's cracks, right?
Will. Absolutely.
It's like a cut on your arm. You got to adjust it. You know, you got to put a Band-Aid on it. Do I need surgery? Let's assess it. But I really don't know what's going on here. And so it's a really common call that we get from homeowners that basically says, hey man, I got cracks and I need help. I don't know what's going on. I don't want it to get worse, or, you know, those types of things is what you're dealing with, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And the cracks are talking to you, is what you're saying. They're telling us some information. So for our viewers and listeners and readers, you know, how can you read the cracks? What do they tell people?
Yeah, what's that difference between the really bad crack and something that's not going to do so much damage?
Typically what the walls do and where the cracks come are the weakest points. So when you have windows or you have walls that go from 8 foot to 4 foot, where those transitions meet are the weakest point of the foundation. Those are where cracks are always going to happen first. Whether your house is settling, whether the walls are moving in, or the house is just adjusting to where it's going to be permanently, Those are where you're normally going to get your cracks to start. During that process, a horizontal crack is usually caused by hydrostatic pressure. Basically, our soils are like a sponge and it expands with the water, and it's Mother Nature versus foundation. Foundation's never going to win if we have too much of it and the maintenance isn't caught up to the house.
Yeah, it's not up to date.
Correct.
Yeah.
So during that process, that's where some of the general maintenance comes in at. That will slow down the crack or stop it permanently.
Mm-hmm.
During that process, that's where you call and we come out, we assess the crack, and then we can come up with a best diagnosis to fix it.
So from a degree of severity, that horizontal crack, is that more significant than, say, a diagonal, or if you're in a mortar, brick and mortar, and you got a stair step? I mean, how does it? What's the degree of that horizontal versus the others?
It really depends on the soil outside.
Okay.
It really depends on how big the crack is, and it depends on where it is in the foundation.
Okay, so let's dissect that a little bit. You got the 1 inch crack where it's obvious, like the one yesterday. It actually had shifted. It was 1.5 inches apart, and it shifted 1.5 inches forward. I mean,
Came out, started protruding.
2 separate
Correct.
movements going on.
Mm-hmm.
But then also within there, you got these little small, 1/8 inch thick little hairline cracks, not showing any signs of water intrusion. We can talk about water intrusion as well and how to read that. Some homeowners don't necessarily pick up on that, and it maybe you can give them some clues as to what to look for. And because anybody that's listening to this as a homeowner, they're like, well, I'm gonna go check my basement. That's so some of them are gonna go down there and start looking for this stuff. So what are some good general tips that you can give to the observer, even to our realtors? We're real estate people, and so we get some realtors that come in. So for the realtors to help give buyer confidence or seller confidence that they know,
Some
what they're
general
talking,
knowledge,
what they're talking about. Because a lot of times, realtors are as fearful as the sellers and the buyers.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, because they don't want to deal with it.
And they ruin deals. They lose. And more importantly, as a realtor, from a entrepreneur perspective, you're losing an opportunity. You really are, because cracks and foundations are an opportunity to help your buyers and give confidence to your sellers by bringing a professional in to resolve the issue permanently. But back on point, general tips on things that they can see, or water intrusion and the different types of cracks. Could you kind of expand on that for them?
The easiest way to see water intrusion is on the actual crack itself. You'll see calcium buildup. It's pretty much white powder.
Mm-hmm.
You'll see stains around where the water is coming in. You might not have any on the floor because you're not getting a lot at that time, but when you have that calcium buildup and that white powdery substance that's in most basements, when you have water coming in, that's a sign of water intrusion in the area.
Right.
Also, if you have dirt or mud at the bottom somewhere, as of yesterday, there was dirt running out of the crack onto the floor because water was coming in for so long.
Right.
Those are typically the first 2 signs of you have water coming in.
Any type of discoloration is a sign.
Correct.
Right. The calcium buildup, I assume, is a residual effect of the time, of the amount of water that's come in.
Correct.
Over time, probably.
Correct.
Yeah. Diagonal cracks, are they telling you something, pointing in a different direction? Some that are going left, some that are going right. Does that mean anything?
It really depends on where they're at. Usually
Okay.
when you have a crack like that, it's coming from the corner and it's working its way up to the middle of the foundation wall. Usually when you have something like that, it means the wall has pressure on the outside and it's starting to move its way in. So you're getting what's called a stress crack. If you catch it quick enough, you'll save so much time and money to repair it. But
Because that crack is actually reaching towards the point of pressure.
the point of pressure.
And so if it's all the way to the middle, because the middle of, and we talk about this a lot, so the middle of that wall is the weakest point of the wall.
Correct.
Because you got the corners that support the outside points of the
Correct.
wall. So if the pressure is coming to the middle, specifically, that crack's going to talk to you and reach back towards the middle. If you catch it early enough before it gets to the middle, it's a lot less expensive
It's a lot less expensive.
and can be extremely extremely less expensive, because if you have to actually start to dig out the exterior wall and push that thing back, which we'll probably touch upon, that gets pricey.
It can definitely get pricey if you wait too long.
Yeah, you bet. So I just touched upon kind of the transition, I guess. What can we do? How can we fix it, right? What are some things that homeowners can expect from the least expensive, where I'm being proactive and trying to reach it and get it early, to the point where, well, it's late, but it's not too late. We still need to, rescue this thing and resolve it.
Get an expert out there or something.
You bet.
Yeah. As we touched on last week when we were going over it, is if you catch it quick enough, then you have options. The first option is if the wall's not in too far, roughly around 2 inches or so, you can put up I-beam braces. You put them every 4 to 5 foot down the wall, and then you inject the cracks, and you can stop the wall where it is, and you don't have to do anything outside other than grading.
Perfect.
The wall's coming in for some reason, and usually it's because of lack of grading on the exterior of that foundation wall. It could be either your gutters are clogged, your downspouts are not out far enough, or the general grade is negative to the house. That can be something that can be done by the homeowner itself once we come in and put in the beams.
Right. In fact, you've mentioned something on that pretty recently, where you saw the sump pump drain basically going into a pool where it essentially sat and didn't necessarily run back to the house, but it
had
didn't,
nowhere to go.
It didn't leave the area of the foundation. It's still hung around the foundation, so it would still trickled in and then basically put pressure, not necessarily end up in the basement again, but it remained a constant pressure on that wall.
Correct.
So getting the water completely away from that foundation is a big piece of some of those resolutions.
Absolutely. The option that you can have is you can also excavate the wall out, either homeowner's choice if the wall's not in far enough, or the wall's in too far to stop it where it's at. And what that is you have to come in, you have to excavate the wall out past the footing, take all the pressure off the wall. Once that's done, we have to raise the house roughly 1/4 to 1/2 inch off the foundation. That way, when we pull, we don't pull any of the structure with it.
Mm-hmm.
We push the wall to its structural limitations. We don't guarantee level, but usually when you push a wall, we can get it back pretty close. Once we get it there, we secure the beams, and then we do all the waterproofing outside. We use a 60 mil membrane. We seal
Right.
the entire wall down past the footing, and then we put in a brand new drain tile next to the footing, and we backfill with 85% gravel.
Okay, super cheap fix. Fill the cracks. Call it good. Wall's going to stay in place. You caught it early enough. Fantastic, because you probably just saved yourself thousands.
Yeah, just
Absolutely.
being proactive.
Being proactive or catching it soon enough, absolutely. Next step up, a little bit more severe, we can brace it.
Yeah.
4 to 5, maybe 4 to 5 feet apart. I-beam braces, holds that wall in place, still fix the cracks, and then that additional support is going to maintain it as long as the wall hasn't come in far enough.
Correct.
Comes in too far, we got to dig from the outside. Very expensive. Manually dig, machine dig, either way, it's a dig.
Mm-hmm.
You got to remove the issue, which is the soil, right? Then finally get the house up just enough so you can push that wall back in place, and then do A and B that we just talked about. Fill the cracks, put the beams in place, so you obviously can tell that it just escalates. And so by catching those cracks early enough, it can be a very big cost savings. Real quickly for those, and then I want to move into next type of issue, which is some settling issues. But real quickly, some people might be saying, well, I don't have a basement, or I got a block and mortar, I got a slab, or my garage floor is cracking. What about my porch, or even my driveway, and some of those things we don't necessarily address. So maybe if you can quickly kind of touch upon that. And then the general homeowner can say, okay, well, Brian said no go, I don't have to worry about it. Others, he's like, I better give him a call, So what
Yeah.
how let's quickly summarize all the cracks, and then the homeowners can kind of take that information and assess their own home, do a quick self-assessment maybe.
For sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, when you're actually basing on slabs, driveways, garage floors, front porches, and your house that's slab on grade, either one, it's exactly what we said last. It's either too much water or not enough. So grading and positive slope is going to help with that as well. When you have a slab on grade house, the foundation's poured differently. So the cracks that you have in the floor are also going to tell you the same thing that cracks in the foundation wall would tell you.
Okay.
When you have cracks on a slab on grade slab, that means it's actually moving. It's not a floating slab. So when you start getting those cracks, that is a settlement issue.
Okay.
And usually what happens is you'll get a star crack, a star pattern, and that's where the soil has expanded the most and it's tried to point load and push,
Pop right through, huh?
pop
Okay.
right up and cause that. And then you start getting the hairlines that come off that break off, and then whatever corner it is the one that starts to slowly settle. It's the exact same thing with driveways and garage floors.
Makes sense. All right, so the point of pressure is going to crack first, and then it just works its way out towards the settlement or the heaviest part of that driveway, and it just kind of follows those lines.
Yes.
Again, preventive maintenance, things that we can do, or are these, what's the resolutions for something like that?
It's really everything is positive grade and drainage.
Okay.
When you're doing driveways, usually you have downspouts that are pouring onto the driveways. If you can get those and push them away, either underground downspout extensions or above ground, and get them away from the driveways to prevent the water from building up there, because those are usually 4 to 6 inches thick. It takes nothing for water to get there and swell up and move them.
So get the water away. Same as what we talk about with positive grade, which is sloping away from the house.
Correct.
Just make sure the water and the positive slope, so any future water gets itself away from the concrete itself, whether it's a driveway, porch, sidewalk,
Correct.
vertical wall, just get the water away.
If you can get as much water away as possible, it will limit the amount of movement you have.
Limits, and most important to speak about that, the water, again, going back to our first episode, is going into clay, and that clay is just like a sponge. It's expanding and giving pressure, or it's contracting without the water. So you get the water away from the house, so the clay is not expanding and pushing back into
Correct.
that foundation or on that driveway or sidewalk. Just get the water away. And so many times you see people that they don't think much of it. The downspout pops off in a heavy rain, or he hits it with a mower, or the kids kicked it, running around the corner of the house playing hide and seek, and they don't think much of it.
Nope.
And so it sits there in January, but guess what? It's still sitting there in April. And we just had one of our heaviest rains in March of all time, and they're wondering why they get water in their basement.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that water had just been coming straight down that corner, going down to either the crack or the cold joint, and pushing right through into the basement, and we're
Finding
getting
its
phone
way
calls.
in.
Simple fix, though. Think about that. Take 2 minutes, stick your downspout on there. Problem would have been solved, but now you have a wet basement that you got to address. You have a potential mold issue that you have to address, and it's all because Fido the dog running around the corner chasing the rabbit hit the downspout and popped off, and now we got this issue. It's super simple fixes.
Yes, it's a very, very easy fix. It's a simple walk around when you're outside doing gardening work or mowing the lawn or something like that. It's just something to watch.
Yep.
Something very easy that could save you thousands of dollars.
Thousands of dollars. Interesting. Okay.
And
So
now
those
it's
are the wall
settling.
cracks, right?
Yeah, just did wall cracks. Let's hit settling.
Settling. So on settling now, this is Brian can talk about this all day. This is the pier side of KC Pier, right? This is our whole brand's sake.
Yeah.
So what do homeowners see? What are some of the common ailments that are giving them indications that this house is, doing some form of settling?
The biggest thing you see is doors not working and cracks coming off trim work or going through the ceiling. Those are the biggest things that homeowners see first that show signs of the foundation settling. You'll see those before you see the cracks in the foundation itself. When your foundation starts to settle, your foundation has a little give. Your sheetrock don't have little give. your 2x4 or your 2x4 studs start bending with it and causing nail pops and causing the cracks to pop.
Perfect.
It's just like a foundation. When you have the doors or the windows, those are the weakest point of your sheetrock. They're the easiest ones to move.
Right. I get it. So the doors and the windows aren't attached to either framing or back to the foundation. They're basically sitting with 2 or 3 contact points. So they're the first ones to kind of give you an indication of something's going on when they start to stick.
Correct.
Right? That makes a lot of sense. And then from there is what I'm repeating what I'm hearing is, all right, the wall or the door is sticking, the windows are sticking, but then all of a sudden nail pops are starting to show because now the sheetrock is starting to adjust.
Correct.
Right? And what types of tolerances? I mean, the house is made to move. I mean, it's Kansas soil, and builders know that going into this, and so there are some tolerances already built into housing construction now. But at what point do we really need to kind of start paying attention to some serious resolutions for a house that's settling?
Like what you hear so far? Make sure you never miss a show by clicking the subscribe button now. The podcast is made possible by listeners like you. Thank you for your likes, shares, and support. Now, back to the show.
Once your house starts moving, at that point, you have to call the professionals to come in and evaluate it to make sure you can correct everything that's going on.
Not totally surprised. I mean, there's very little that I can think of as a homeowner when that house, multi-ton house, is starting to move on you.
Yeah.
That you can really do. I mean, we've seen some things. We've seen some real interesting self-help attempts in some of these basements, right?
Yes, we have.
We've seen multi-foundations, rock and block in front of rock and poured in front of block, and the old 2x4s holding up, floor joists. We've seen it all, but guess what? It doesn't work.
Yeah, DIY doesn't really help with
No,
foundation issues.
no,
especially on your biggest investment you ever have.
Right. It's time to call the professionals, and you'll draw that up. You'll take all the measurements, and that's a really good time to assess as a homeowner, to sit back and just let the professionals draw it up for you and assess your issues and options from there. And I guess that's kind of how it works, right? Is the at that point they're calling into, for you at KC Pier, and they're going to set up some type of consultant to come out, a structural consultant, maybe yourself or one of the others, to come out and then take those measurements that we talked about, draw it up for them, and give them an assessment of what's going on.
Correct. And it's just like the waterproofing phase. If you catch it fast enough, there's options. Once you catch it and you start seeing the movement, the faster you call us, the cheaper it is.
True, because you don't have to pier, and we talked about this before, you don't have to pier a whole house. You can actually, just do a section of a house if that's the section is the only section that's really moving. You don't want to do everything necessarily because you're overspending and maybe spending unnecessary monies. And so catching it early can really be an affordable option in the long run.
It can be very affordable. There's a lot of people that go in and just shave doors to make them fit.
Right.
Well, you can only shave that door so many times.
Right.
Until you start going from door to door to door, and then you go from 3 piers to 13 piers.
Right. Yeah. So fixing a residual effect of the issue does not fix the issue. But I like it. Yeah. It's a great attempt, but man, that's going to get expensive. Shaving that $50, $100 door is not piering the house to resolve the issue, so you never have to shave it in the first place.
Correct.
Right. Okay. So at that point, we've talked about cracks. We've talked about settling.
I
guess
had a question real quick.
Sure.
On settling, I was actually wondering, like you said, just shave one door, and then you find yourself going down the hallway in your house, and you had to shave all these doors over time. Does it start just from like a back corner and settle throughout the entire house, or is it usually just one side that's falling?
It really depends on the house itself. Okay. It depends on the grade outside. It typically starts in a corner. Usually once it starts moving, it's going to find the path of least resistance, just like water does.
Yeah.
It's going to continue to move. Usually the most exposed foundation starts to move first versus a full basement that's 8 foot under. Usually when you have a walkout, that's the one that starts moving first because it's easier to get to the bottom of the foundation with the soil and the heat. But once it starts, it just don't stop. It continues to move, and the more it moves, the more money you have to invest.
Yeah. So catch it early and avoid the last step.
Yeah, and you could be a victim of just the substrate in the soil where, sides of houses could need adjustment. But yeah, typically you're right. It just kind of starts in an area and then spreads, but there are exceptions to that. I mean, we've had houses that 4 piers and you're done, you're out, you're done, you call it good. We've also had houses where it's, 35, 40 piers and you're basically pinning the whole house, something that's what we call is in full tilt. It's just, we're going to put everything on stilts essentially. So it really does vary. And again, if you have or see some type of indicator, the doors are sticking, the windows are sticking, and the nail pops are there, especially if you're seeing the cracks in the drywall, then it's time to just call somebody in and let's get an assessment and they give you an idea of how severe that issue may be.
Correct.
Okay, so we talked about cracks, reading cracks. We talked about settling. The one thing that maybe we've touched upon maybe a little bit because we talked about water, but we really didn't expand on it. Let's maybe jump into, especially with this year, we've seen a ton of waterproofing. So let's talk about wall issues. Waterproofing. What are some of the different techniques that homeowners can kind of, because they are dealing with water. What are some of the different techniques that homeowners can help address some of the resolutions for water issues in a house?
The cheapest effective way is downspout extensions. Get the gutters and the downspouts away from the home. By far the cheapest one is keeping your gutters clean.
Right.
If they're clogged, the water's going straight over it, and it doesn't matter what's going on.
And some of those houses don't have gutters at all.
Yeah.
And
Really?
and clogged gutters are just like not having gutters at all, right?
It's
and that water
same
just
thing.
it does. It goes straight down and it's going to go straight in, especially if you don't have positive grade or even over time. That water coming down off that roof line or over those gutters is going to create a channel and a depression where the water can't get away from the house and it's going to have to go down.
It's going to go down, expand the soil, and it's going to cause wall movements, or it's just going to flood your basement, depending on which way it flows and where your crack is. Depends on the floating slab. But if you don't have positive grade, you don't keep your gutters clean, and you don't have downspout extensions to get the water away from your home, you're not doing any favors to your home.
Sure.
What about like the DIY warrior that just wants to inject their cracks themselves? What do you got to say for people who try to do that? Because I know we've seen a few at some jobs.
Good point.
Honestly, if you want to try it, that's fine. But if you try it and it doesn't work and you call a professional out, it costs you more because we have to dig it all out before we can do it correctly.
Gotcha.
So if you don't have any experience with it, I wouldn't do that. It's just going to cost you twice as much because for one, you have to pay for the material and you're doing your own labor. And then when it doesn't work, you have to pay for us to tear it all out, clean it, and then inject it correctly.
So
and be sure you have the correct material because the hydraulic cement or the caulk, the mortar, the grout I found in the corner, and we've seen that, right? It's
that Flex Seal spray.
Flex.
That's been huge over the last few years.
Absolutely, spray it and forget it. Well, it doesn't work. It's not a boat floating in the water. This is hydraulic, hydraulic pressure. So, yeah, having the right material, which you're absolutely correct. We've seen a lot of DIY, and it does get more expensive because we have to undo the work before we can do the work. And so again, it's one of those things. Before you try it, maybe you just have someone assess it and go from there. So the crack is and downspouts and water away from the house is definitely the least expensive, easiest general maintenance. The injection is probably next, right? What's after that? Continue the escalation if you could.
If you have the water pressure there and you don't have the right drains, usually what happens is you have to go into the beams that you have on the walls. Once you do the injections correctly, the cracks are there for a reason. it's water only and the walls are not coming in, you can get away with ejections, and it'll be something that you can monitor.
Okay.
Once you do the injections, once it's done, it's sealed so you can see if the wall's continuing to move or not. So it could be a very cheap way of assessing the issue before you have to put a major amount of money into the wall.
Yeah. Some people wonder if those
Makes
cracks are
sense.
moving. So
Yeah.
get them treated. And if they pop back open, obviously you got an active moving house, but many times it resolves it and it's static.
Cool.
So good. So the drain systems also, though, we didn't really touch upon drain system. That's kind of a next escalation for water retention. You can either do an interior drain, right, and catch the water as it enters the house, or you can do the exterior, which you talked about earlier, an exterior dig out which kind of goes with a wall pushback that gets the water away. The one thing that homeowners that I'd like to touch upon before we kind of wind up is sump pumps, because it's almost in every house, right?
Mhm.
Or, you know, especially in basements, and they need to be if they don't in most homes. So, and most home owners obviously want to know more about sump pumps and have that's their relationship to waterproofing,
Yes.
or in many cases a sump pump. So, any couple pointers on sump pump maintenance, what are they there for, what are they doing, just if you can kind of expand there, that'd be great.
Yes, absolutely. Sump pumps are great. I truly believe every basement should have one, no matter what. A lot of homeowners want to put them in the easiest access possible, and usually that's not the best place for them. The best place for a pump is at the top grade of the house of your soil outside. So if you have a walkout, you don't want it at the back of your walkout. You want it where the soil is sloping at the highest point. And basically, water flows downhill.
Mm-hmm.
So if the land is flowing downhill, you don't want it at the back of your house to allow the water to get all the way under your slab, continue to swell the soil,
Right.
and get to the pump.
For sure.
You want it at the highest point of the house to catch everything. The other option is a battery backup system. They're
Right.
very good. The one we use is LED, so there's no chasing lights. It literally tells you up top what's wrong with it. We also use one of the biggest pumps that we can put in the market, strictly because of the water that we have coming in.
Right.
Right.
No cutting corners, no quarter pump and half pump on sale. This is real commercial equipment with a backup. And that talks to you, so it dummies down to the point where it's easy maintenance. It's set it and forget it for the most part.
Yes, anybody can use it.
Mhm.
Anybody can look at it, tell you exactly what's going on with it. There's no looking up a manual or doing anything like that. It
So,
literally tells you on time.
From a concerned homeowner's perspective, exploring a sump pump replacement or an assessment is also something that you do, I assume.
Correct.
Yeah, pretty often.
Yes, that's actually one of our easiest installs we have, and we love them. It's
Right.
very inexpensive for the homeowner itself. If you already have the basin in place, it's not as expensive as you think to change those out.
Right. So great preventative maintenance tool
Correct.
inside the home. I mean, everything we've talked about in terms of homeowners preventative has been outside. A preventative maintenance is maybe an assessment of your sump pump, right? And let's make sure, because builder's grade. Anybody that's built a home and seen builder's grade carpet and builder's grade this and builder's grade that, well, the sump pump's no exception. It's builder's grade as well.
Absolutely.
And you just bought a $300,000 or $400,000 house, a $500,000 house with a builder's grade sump pump. It may be time to do some assessment and really get a professional piece of equipment in there with a backup that is there to protect that extremely large investment that you just committed to for the next 30 years, most likely, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I think we covered basically everything.
I think so too. It's a great overview. Good general maintenance there for homeowners. We're going to continue to dive into each of those fixes over the next few weeks, specifically case by case, and really look into horizontal cracks and diagonal cracks and how to resolve those. And so we're going to break those all down over the next few weeks. So we look forward to that. We're just slowly getting a little bit more deductive and finite for our homeowners and realtors that are kind of watching. So we appreciate the time.
Yeah,
No
absolutely.
problem.
Right. And then we'll have you back here in probably a week or two, and we're going to dive into the next subject areas
Some more
of
stuff.
these specific types of issues even further.
Yeah, that'll work.
Awesome. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this podcast for today, talking some foundation with the guys. We'll see you on the next episode, and you guys have a great day.
Take care.
Thanks for joining us this week on the Kansas City Real Estate Industry Leaders Show. Please support all things local to Kansas City. And hey, be sure to subscribe and share our podcast on Facebook and LinkedIn. This has been a KC Property Guys production. KCPropertyGuys.com.